Hello students, today we are going to continue with the discussion on partial differentials and multivariable calculus. This is part 3 of that module on partial differentials. This is part of the course CHE 641 at IIT Kanpur, Mathematical Methods in Chemical Engineering. So the two key concepts we discussed in the first two modules are the idea of a total differential, okay, and the idea of a total derivative. If you have a function f of two variables, f of x, y, let's say, then if you ask the question, what is the change in the function df due to the fact that x changes by a small amount dx and y changes by a small amount dy, then that is given by partial f partial x at constant y dx plus partial f partial y at constant x dy. Now, whenever you write a partial derivative, you also signify what are the variables that are kept constant. So here y is kept constant, here x is kept constant. Okay, so this notion is called the idea of a total differential df. This is very useful in thermodynamics. You might have used this many times in thermodynamics. Okay, now the other important idea is that of a total derivative or a substantial derivative, which is let's say you have a variable like temperature, which is a function of spatial location and time. Now, if you were to take the partial derivative of temperature with respect to time, keeping the spatial location x constant, this amounts to keeping a thermometer at a given location in space, and let's say you have fluid flow in a tube or something like that in a channel, and you are merely measuring the temperature at a given point in space as a function of time, and you look at the time derivative at that point, that will amount to the partial derivative. Often it is useful to also calculate what is called the total or substantial derivative, wherein you don't sit at a given point in space, rather you follow a given point, given fluid particle, as it travels in the flow. Okay, so here the fluid particle is denoted by the label capital X, which could be perhaps the initial position of the particle at a given time, and then you are following the particle as a function of time. So the trajectory of the fluid particle is given by this function. The current position of the fluid particle small x as a function of time depends on its initial position capital X and time. Now the substantial derivative, which is denoted, or the total derivative, which is denoted by capital D temperature d time, is given by partial t, partial temperature, partial time at constant capital X. This is not the same as the partial derivative of temperature with time at constant small x, okay, which is the usual time derivative that we take. So in order to do this, we again use the notion of the total derivative, and we figured in the last module that this is partial t at constant x plus the velocity of the fluid Vx in the x direction times partial t partial x. Okay, so this is at, of course, constant time. Okay, now this can also be generalized to higher dimensions. So partial t in 3 dimensions is nothing but partial t partial time at constant x plus Vx partial t partial x plus Vy partial t partial y plus Vz partial t partial z. Okay, so here when I say v partial t partial x, the other variables are kept constant, namely y, z and time. Similarly here x, z and time. So here x, y and time. So I'm not writing it down for the sake of brevity. Okay, now let's start a slightly different topic in this module. Now suppose you have a function of two variables, f of x, y. Okay, now you want to convert x to r cosine theta and y to r sine theta. Okay, so these are the plane polar coordinates, as you all know. So you might be familiar with x, y, and then r, and then theta, right? These are the plane polar coordinates. This is r, this is the point, the distance from the origin is r, and so on, right? Now I would like to convert f of xy to g of r theta, the same function but represented in terms of the new variables r and theta. Okay, so not just convert the function, I would like to convert this differential equation, this partial differential equation, why is it a partial differential equation? Partial differential expression, because it is comprised of partial derivatives, higher order partial derivatives. Okay, in fact this operator is called the del squared operator or the Laplacian operator. This is something that you will encounter in heat transfer, mass transfer, fluid mechanics, electromagnetism, quantum mechanics, what have you. In science and engineering, the Laplacian is something very ubiquitous. Okay, so what is our objective? Our objective is to convert this Laplacian expression, partial squared f by partial x squared plus partial squared f by partial y squared, to a differential equation or a partial differential expression in r theta, comprising of derivatives in r theta. So how do we do this? You do this in a very straightforward manner. In order to do this, first it's useful to have the following partial derivatives. What is partial r partial x? I'm sorry about this. Partial r partial x at constant y, and because r is x squared plus y squared to the power half, and theta is tan inverse y by x, we can take derivatives fairly easily. This is nothing but x upon x squared plus y squared to the half. This is x by r, which is cosine theta. Similarly, you can verify that partial r partial y at constant x is y by r, which is sine theta. Now we also need partial theta partial x at constant y, which is minus sine theta by r, and we will need partial theta by partial y at constant x, which is plus cos theta by r. Okay, this is just obtained by differentiating the tan inverse and then using the basic relations x is equal to r cos theta and so on. Okay, so I don't want to spend time, but it's rather straightforward. Okay, now how are we going to calculate or convert the partial differential expression or the Laplacian operator from the xy coordinates, xy variables to r theta variables? That is the conversion that we are planning to do. Now in order to do that, first you think of f as a function of r theta, then df is nothing but partial f partial r at constant theta dr plus partial f partial theta at constant r d theta. This is the total differential of f if f is written as a function of r theta. Now in my original expression for the Laplacian, I have partial f partial squared f partial x squared. So first I'll construct what is partial f partial x constant y from this expression. Now this is partial f partial r at constant theta partial r partial x at constant y. Why is it this constant y? Because I am keeping y constant here, plus partial f partial theta constant r partial theta partial x at constant y. Now we know what these are. Okay, this is we just discussed what this is. This is cosine theta, and this is let me just see. Yeah, this is minus sine theta by r. Okay, we just wrote these expressions. So what is partial f partial x at constant y? This is nothing but, okay, let me just erase this, cos theta partial f partial r at constant theta minus sine theta by r partial f partial theta constant r. Okay, this is something that we just wrote from the total differential and based on what the derivatives of r and theta with respect to x are. In a very similar manner, you can also write what is partial f partial y at constant x. That is nothing but sine theta partial f partial r at constant theta plus cos theta by r partial f partial theta at constant r. Okay, now so you can write d dx of anything that anything could be f or anything else is cos theta partial r constant theta minus sin theta by r partial theta at constant r operating on that something. Okay, based on this, instead of f you can have anything. So what is d squared by f by dx squared? All I have to do is I have to operate d dx on df dx. But I know what is the d dx operator. This is the d dx operator. It can operate on anything including df dx. So what I'll get is this cos theta partial r at constant theta minus sin theta by r partial theta at constant r operating on itself, right? Operating on itself, because this happens here once and then once more here, operating on f, right? So now this is a bit of straightforward algebra. So what I'll do is I'll simply write the result. This is nothing but cos squared theta, because you have to square this, partial squared theta partial squared by partial r squared, plus sin squared theta by r squared partial theta squared, plus 2 sin theta cos theta upon r squared partial theta minus 2 sin theta cos theta upon r partial squared by partial r partial theta plus sin squared theta by r partial by partial r. So this is whole operating on f. Similarly, in the original Laplacian we also had partial squared f by partial y squared. Now if you do that, you will get a whole bunch of terms. Let me just write down. It's in a very similar manner. You can do this: sin squared theta partial squared f by partial r squared minus 2 cos theta sin theta by r squared partial f partial r plus 2 cos theta sin theta by r partial squared f by partial r partial theta plus cos squared theta by r partial f partial r plus cos squared theta by r squared partial squared f, this is r squared, sorry, by partial theta squared. Now you have to add these two expressions. So if you add these two, you can readily see that this is plus 2 sin theta cos theta by r squared, this is minus, so this is going to cancel with this. Similarly, you have minus 2 sin theta cos theta by r d squared by d, so this is the same term with a plus, this is going to cancel with this, right? And is there anything else? I think that's all there is that cancels. Okay, so one thing you can figure out is, you consider the coefficient of partial squared by partial theta squared, partial squared f by partial theta squared. You will find that you have sin squared theta by r squared, cos squared theta by r squared. This sin squared theta adds with this cos squared theta to give you 1. So finally, when you simplify, you will get a relatively simple expression. So this is just based on what we learnt in terms of total differential of a partial derivative. What is this? This is nothing but partial squared f by partial r squared plus 1 by r partial f partial r plus 1 by r squared partial squared f partial theta squared. Okay, this is the Laplacian in polar coordinates. So when you say del squared f is partial squared f by partial x squared plus partial squared f by partial y squared, this expression is valid only in Cartesian or rectangular coordinates. Okay, whereas the same Laplacian in polar coordinates takes this form. That's because you have angles, and then if you learn a little bit of vector calculus, you will realize that the unit vectors are changing as you change the coordinate direction. But you need not know that here, because you can simply treat it as a function of two variables, and there is a variable transformation, and you will simply get this. Okay, there are two ways of thinking about the same thing. Now another important idea that I'm going to discuss next, okay, we're going to change gears a little bit. This is called the notion of a Taylor series, but not for single variable, of multiple variables, of a function of, okay. First, of course, it's good to know what is Taylor series of a single variable. Taylor series, or it's also called Taylor expansion. If you say single variable, then you might have learnt it in your earlier lectures or earlier courses that if you have a function of x and if you want to expand it about x plus a, okay, you can write it as an approximation of about the value of the function at a plus partial f partial x at a, x minus a, plus 1 over 2 factorial partial squared f partial x squared at a, x minus a the whole squared, and so on. Okay, here of course there is no need for partial derivatives. I could have had ordinary derivatives, okay, because it's just a function of single variable. I'm going to soon generalize it to multiple variables. Okay, what is the idea of a Taylor series? The idea of the Taylor series is as follows. Suppose you know, you want to know what is the value of the function about its value at x equal to a. Let's say this is x equal to a. Here the value of the function is f of a. Okay. Now I want, based on the value of the function at f of a, which is f, right? F of a, its derivative at at a at x equal to a, its first derivative at x equal to a, its second derivative at x equal to a, right? This is the first derivative at x equal to a, this is the second derivative at x equal to a, and so on and so on. Can I construct the value of the function in the neighborhood of x equal to a based on all the information at a? Okay, so that is the idea of Taylor series. Okay, so if you are fairly close enough, you can truncate the series at linear or quadratic orders, and you will be able to get a reasonable approximation of the function. The actual function may be something like this, but then you may get something like this if you truncate at the second order, and so on. Okay. Now the goal of this discussion is, of course, to generalize it to multiple variables. Okay, so let's start with two variables. That's the simplest. What do we do? Suppose if I were to expand about the point x0 y0, then the Taylor series of a function of two variables is as follows: partial f by partial x evaluated at x0 y0 times delta x. I'll tell you what delta x is in a minute. It is x minus x0 plus partial f by partial y evaluated at x0 y0 times delta y plus 1 over 2 factorials times partial squared f by partial x squared, okay, evaluated at x0 y0, which I'll denote as 0, times delta x squared plus 2 partial squared f by partial x partial y evaluated at 0. The 0 is a short form for x0 y0. Okay, delta x delta y plus partial squared f by partial y squared evaluated at the point x0 y0 times delta y squared. Okay, delta y squared plus higher order terms. Okay, this is up to quadratic order, second order. Now if I were to write partial f partial x, so just to be complete, delta x is x minus x0, delta y is y minus y0. x0 y0 are the fixed points and x and y are variables. Okay, now if I were to write partial f by partial x delta x plus partial f by partial y delta y as delta x partial partial x plus delta y partial partial y operating on f, then I can write this term. Okay, let me just I can write this term as simply 1 over 2 factorial times delta x partial partial x plus delta y partial partial y the whole squared operating on f of xy. Why? Because if I expand this square, the first term will be this squared, this term will be this squared plus 2ab, which is 2 times partials f, partial by partial x and partial by partial y of f, which is the second mixed derivative. Okay, so why am I writing it in this form? Because it helps to generalize to a function of n variables, because sorry, not a function of n variables. I can generalize it to higher orders, because I can write the Taylor expansion of a function of two variables in a general summation form as follows: n is equal to 0 to infinity 1 over n factorial delta x partial partial x plus delta y partial partial y whole to the power n operating on f of x y, and these derivatives are all evaluated at x0 y0. Okay, so this is the beauty of multivariable Taylor expansion. You can two variable Taylor expansion. You can quickly write down the higher order terms using this simple formula. Okay, let me just box this. This is a very important formula. Okay, let me do it slightly better. I'm sorry about this. Okay, this is a very important formula that's useful in many applications. Okay, now what is one use that you can what is the one thing that you can put to use this formula immediately? And that application comes in finding, I'm sorry, let me just choose a pen. This, sorry about this. Okay, stationary points, that is maxima and minima of a function of two variables. If you know for single variables, if you have a function f of x, you know that if let me write the ordinary derivative. If you know that df dx, the first derivative is 0 at some point x naught, then the function is either a maximum or a minimum or a point of inflection. I'll come to this in a minute. Okay, why? Because if I have a function like this locally, then if this is the point x0, right? Now if this is a minimum, of course, from the graph of the function. Now if I walk a little bit away about the minimum, okay, then if I walk very little, then there is no change, because df dx is 0. To first order there is no change. If I look at second order deviations from the minimum, then you will find that it increases quadratically. So it's increasing. That means that if it is a minimum, then d squared f by dx squared at x naught should be greater than 0 if the function is a minimum. On the other hand, if the function exhibits a maximum at x0, then d squared f by dx squared by the same argument evaluated at x0 should be negative. So this immediately tells you a criterion for finding the maximum and minimum of a function of one variable. Now what is a case when you have, suppose you have d squared f by dx squared is also 0. Okay, now that is corresponding to a point of inflection, that is the function of x will change like this, go like this. Okay, so here both the first and second derivatives can be 0. Okay, so now what if you have more than one variable? That is the point of this lecture anyway. So function of, we are looking at multivariable systems or multivariable functions, right? So how to find stationary points of a function of two variables to begin with, and then I'll come to many variables. Okay, now clearly if you have a function of two variables, suppose you take a point x0 y0, if you want this point to be a stationary point, that means if you walk a little bit away from that point, then you should not find any change. So that means that partial f partial x at x0 y0 should be 0, partial f partial y at the stationary point must be 0. So this is a given, right? You have to have this in order to, because why? Because you know what the total differential is, partial f partial x dx plus partial f partial y dy. Now in order for this not to undergo any change, if you walk a little bit, that means that individually both this and this must be 0. That's what I've written here. Okay. Now what is the nature of the stationary point? We have just found the stationary point. If I find that the stationary point is found by setting partial f by partial x 0, partial f by partial y 0. These are the two equations that are to be solved to find. If you solve these two equations, you will find the stationary points. There may be one, two, or many. But what about the nature? Is it a maximum or a minimum? How do we do this? In order to do this, you have to look at Taylor expansion. So you take the value of the function minus, minus its value at the stationary point. This is the deviation about the stationary point. To first order, the first partial differentials are 0. So all you will have is the second order deviations, which is delta x squared partial squared f by partial x squared at 0 plus 2 partial x partial y, right, partial squared f by partial x partial y at 0 plus partial y, delta y the whole squared partial squared f by partial y squared at 0. Okay. What is delta x? As usual, x minus x 0, and delta y is y minus y 0. Okay, that is the same notation that we used just now. Now at a minimum, if you just walk along the x direction alone, then if the function should be a maximum or minimum, you have to just look at the second derivative of this. Suppose delta y is 0, that means these two terms will not contribute, and you have to look at only this function in order to judge whether it is maximum or minimum. That is like a single variable problem. Likewise, obviously, if you walk only along the y direction keeping x constant, that is delta x is 0, then you will look at this. So by analogy with single variable maxima minima, you will have this, okay, for a maximum, for a minimum, and a partial squared f by partial y squared also. If this is greater than 0, it's a minimum, and likewise conversely, if both these second order partial differentials are less than 0, it must be a maximum. But who's to tell us that you have to walk only along the x and y direction? You can walk in any direction. So you have to look at the sign of this term as well. So in order to do that, it's useful to rewrite this function, the deviation f of x y minus f of x 0 y 0 as, this is not exact because I have truncated it up to second order, so I'll have to write an approximate symbol. So the above expression can be rewritten as fxx, this is the second derivative, times delta x plus fxy delta y by fxx the whole squared. You can verify that all I'm doing is to rewrite the previous expression, plus delta y squared times fyy minus fxy squared by fxx. Okay, I've truncated up to second order. Now for a minimum, now let's look at conditions for minimum. For minimum, you need delta f, which is this quantity, should be greater than 0, because only then you are at the bottom of a bowl or a cup or something like that, right? So in order to do this, you need fxx is greater than 0, fyy should be greater than 0. Okay, now this is already a square, so this is a positive quantity. Okay, so that cannot be negative, right? So you need so fxx has to be greater than 0. Now this is a positive quantity, so you need fyy minus fxy squared by fxx also to be greater than 0. In other words, all you need is fxy squared is greater than fxx fxy. Oh, uh, let me see if I made a mistake here. You need this to be greater than 0, so I have to have it fxx fyy is greater than fxy squared. I'm sorry about this, right? So you need these three conditions to be satisfied. Fxs is greater than 0, fyy is greater than 0, and the third condition is fxx times fyy is greater than fxy squared. Let me draw it slightly better. I'm sorry about this. Let's yeah, okay, this is the condition for minimum of function of two variables. This is criteria for minimum. This is often used in thermodynamics. If you want to look at the minimum of Gibbs free energy or something like that, the Gibbs free energy is a function of pressure and temperature, and if you want to minimize that function, you need to use these formulae because you have a function of two variables. Now let's look at maximum. For maximum, okay, then you have fx is less than 0, fyy is less than 0. Now because fxx the second derivative, so remember that fxx is nothing but partial squared f partial x squared, fyy is partial squared f by partial y squared, and so on. Okay, so this you can write as minus mod fxx because it's negative. Okay, let me just, you can write it as minus of mod f, and similarly fyy is minus mod fyy. Okay, so let's consider the term fyy minus fxy squared by fxx. This is what appears in the change in the function. If you look at this expression, this is the term that we are looking at. Okay, just now we wrote this, right? Okay, you can write this as in terms of the mod fyy plus fxy squared by mod fxx. Okay, now this has to be, okay, now what should this be for a maximum? For a maximum, fxx is less than 0. This entire thing has to be less than 0 because you are at the top of the hill, and whatever way direction you walk, you should the function should decrease, right? So this should be negative, so this has to be less than 0, right? In other words, fxx fyy is greater than fxy squared. But because both these are negative, I can remove the mod because both fxx and fyy are negative. So fxx fyy is greater than fxy squared, and in addition you also had fxx is less than 0, fyy is less than 0. This is the condition for maximum. Okay, the condition for maximum and minimum are slightly different. This is common in both cases, whereas for maximum this has to be less than 0. Partial squared f by partial x squared and partial squared f by partial y squared should be less than 0. For minimum it's the opposite. Okay, so this is the condition for maximum. I'm sorry about this. This is the condition for maximizing a function of two variables. Okay, now there is one special case for a function of two variables, that's called a saddle. Okay, this is called a saddle point, right? So here fxx and fyy have opposite signs. If one is positive, the other is negative. This is called a saddle point, or fxy squared is greater than fxx fyy. A saddle looks something like this. If you go in one direction, the function is a minimum. If you go in the other direction, you have to view it in a three-dimensional manner. So this is like the saddle is the object that is put on a horse in order for you to sit. That wooden object is called a saddle. So if you notice, there is a curvature in this direction, and then out of the board it will be in that direction. So it is minimum along one direction, minimum along one direction and maximum along the other direction. That is called a saddle point. and the condition for saddle is fxx and fyy should have opposite signs. Okay, now these are all the criteria for maxima and minima of functions. Now as a just as a teaser, okay, suppose you ask the question, what about functions of many variables? What is if f is not a function of two variables, it's a function of x1 x2, it's a collection of n variables minus x1 naught x2 naught xn naught. This is the difference. Now it turns out that you can generalize the Taylor series to n variables, and up to second order variation you will find that this is partial xi partial xj evaluated at the stationary point. This is to quadratic order, that is you Taylor expand only up to the second order. Okay, higher order terms are neglected here. Now this matrix, this is like a matrix because this is an array of so many rows and columns. This can be thought of as a matrix Mij. We'll come to this in detail as we go along and discuss linear algebra. But delta f can be therefore written as delta x transpose dot m dot delta x, where delta x vector is nothing but the collection delta x1 delta x2 so on up to delta xn and so on. Okay, now this is called a quadratic form. Now you have to judge whether the stationary point is maximum or minimum, that is delta f is greater than 0 or less than 0, regardless of the directions of the steps delta x. See, delta x is like a displacement in a multidimensional space, right? Now in a very rather magical manner, you will find that the maxima or minima of functions of many variables are related to what are called the eigenvalues of this matrix. Okay, you might have heard of the word eigenvalues in elementary matrix algebra. We'll come to this in a short while when we discuss linear algebra in this course, but I'm just giving this to you as a teaser that you can indeed find the function the maxima and minima of functions of many variables by looking at the eigenvalue of the second derivative in the Taylor expansion. So that is what I will say right now, but I will of course derive this criteria in detail from basic principles of linear algebra. Now let's just do an example from thermodynamics. Okay, so you know the combined first and second law, du is TdS minus Pd. This is something that we all know. Now u is a function of S and V, the internal energy U in thermodynamics, right? So du is written as partial U partial S at constant V ds plus partial U partial V at constant S dV. So du, by comparing these two, okay, if I compare these two, then T is partial U partial S constant V, and P is minus partial U partial V at constant S. Just by comparing these two I get this. Okay, now because U is a state function, it is an exact differential. Okay, now if it's an exact differential, then the mixed second derivatives must be the same, that is partial by partial V of partial U by partial S is partial by partial S of partial U by partial V. In other words, if I substitute what is T and P, then I will get partial by partial V of T is minus partial by partial S of P at constant V. This is at constant S, because when I do this partial derivative, right, I'm keeping when I do this partial derivative, I'm keeping S constant. When I do this partial derivative, I'm keeping V constant. This is nothing but partial U partial S is again at constant V, and this is at constant S. So these are temperatures and pressures, that's why I just wrote down. So you get this expression. This is called a Maxwell relation in thermodynamics. This is often used in thermodynamic applications, very profoundly used. This is called the Maxwell relation. So with this I come to a close of what I wanted to very briefly cover in the topic of multivariable calculus. Now of course we are not going to shelve this topic in the rest of the course. This will keep appearing in different avatars as we go along, but as a bare bones introduction to multivariable calculus, this is something that all of you must absolutely know. When you go to the next topic, which is complex variables, again this will come in a different variety, and then when you go to partial differential equations, again you will encounter differentials, partial differentials, but you should be able to know what is meant by total differential, total derivative, substantial derivative, how to convert partial derivatives from one coordinate frame to another, and so on, based on what we have covered so far in these 3 modules. So I'll stop here, and in the next module I will start complex analysis. Until then, bye.